All right. Welcome, everyone. This presentation is going to be recorded, and the recording has commenced. My name's Lynelle Watts, and I've got the grand role of being a bit of an MC. So to start us off today, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from the lands of the traditional owners of country, the Whadjuk Noongar people, where I'm coming to you from Perth, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to welcome everybody to this session. I think we have a chat session open for people to say what country they're coming from as a land acknowledgement and to introduce themselves to the group. So if you haven't done that already, feel free to introduce yourself. And we were playing a song. It was Forgotten Eyes by Big Thief, a favorite of Brontё's. They're a Brooklyn, New York band. And we felt that Brontё felt the song really speaks to interconnectedness and reciprocity of us and the theme of what is made hidden or invisible or forgotten. And so it seemed very appropriate to this session today. So I just want to give everyone a bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing and talking about. So Brontё's going to take us through the background of the project and talk about the photo voice process and narratives and key messages that have come out of her research. And then we're going to hand over to Alison from the Centre for Women's Safety and Wellbeing. Welcome, Alison, and to talk about her perspective on the project. And we'll have time for questions and answers later in the session. And then we hope there'll be time for reflection and comments from the audience, which is always lovely when someone's presenting their work. So I'd just like to introduce Brontё. It's a great pleasure to do this section. Brontё is a PhD candidate and social worker and so much more than that, but let's go with that. And she works in the area of family and violence and disability sectors. I've had the pleasure of knowing Brontё for the last 7 years and working alongside her, and it is a pleasure. She has been living in Queensland until recently, and she likes to hike and play football and she worked for a while working with the Disrupting Violence Beacon at Griffith University. She's also worked at Curtin University too, and I think is also will be working in Melbourne. She's recently moved to Naarm, and I understand has taken up crochet. So she's a person of many, many talents, which I'm sure you're going to find out. So I'm going to hand over to Brontё now, and I'll probably turn my camera off for a little while and let Brontё take the centre stage. Over to you, Brontё.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Lynelle. I'd also like to start by acknowledging country and acknowledging that I'm joining from the lands of the Wurundjeri and Wurrung people, the Kulin nations, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and young people who will continue legacies of survival and resilience into the future. I welcome any mob joining us today and really acknowledge the legacies of storytelling and the influence of Aboriginal leaders weaving their way into this project. I also want to acknowledge the agency and resistance of victim survivors and survivors joining us here today. Honouring their stories was really central to this work and the whole purpose of this work, really. So it would not have been possible without their contributions. So just on note on language, I'll be talking today about domestic and family violence, which I also call family violence or DFE. And I use the term women with disability throughout the webinar to talk about the experiences of cis and trans women as they're targeted disproportionately by people using family violence and are victimised at far higher rates than women generally. As an intersectional project, though, I also acknowledge that there is a disproportionate burden of violence victimisation on trans non-binary folk and those who experience more barriers to justice seeking and support. So just a bit of background about the project. And really we're here today to launch the website, the photovoice website, which was one part of a larger doctoral study. So this is really the kind of product of that photovoice process. And so the Hidden Someone was a photovoice project which was investigating family violence against women with disability, and came about from earlier work which explored service responses to women with disability seeking safety, and found that they received really varied responses depending on which services were being accessed. So whether they're going to disability services or whether they're going to family violence services. So the project was guided by intersectionality as an overarching theory. So which at its core, sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on the chat at the same time. At its core, so intersectionality really seeks to make visible the impact of structures of oppression. So things that we talk about like ableism, racism, classism, sexism, make those visible and how they impact the everyday lives of people. So what does it look like when groups and individuals are marginalised by multiple overlapping forms of discrimination? And the impacts can be very contextual. So that means that how compounding discrimination looks for one person may be very different to how it looks for another person in another community or environment. But the important part and what intersectionality is really asking is, now that we can see how inequality is produced, how can we change the process and how can we make things different? So I'll just pull up the website and just have that in the background as we go, because I'm going to show a bit of the website today as as we are kind of launching and try to showcase kind of what was produced. So photovoice is really, firstly, there was a previous scoping review that happened before starting this photovoice process. So the scoping review really looked at the international literature, and which found consistently high rates of DFE against women with disability compared to women generally, but also that there was a lack of comparable data and really limited perpetrator data. So it found that barriers to accessing safety for women were compounded by ableism and sexism in everyday encounters. So that kind of brings us to the photovoice component of the project. So photovoice is really a way of listening to and collecting participants' thoughts and opinions using photos or other accessible media. And it was developed out of this tradition of documentary film or anthropology and also participatory action research by Wang and Burris. So its main aims are to enable groups to record the strengths and any concerns that they have about their community, and also promote dialogue or critical dialogue about issues which are important to them. And the third aim of photovoice is to enact political change by reaching an audience, and specifically an audience of policymakers. So again, that focus on social change. So the methodology was really flexible and adaptable, and it needed to be shaped as we went along, as we learnt as a group, so shaped by participants and the research team as well, which I didn't introduce earlier, but was myself and Donna, Chung, Lynelle Watts and Beck Waters. And the process of photovoice usually includes participants being trained in the visual methods or choosing or taking photos themselves, and then entering into dialogue among the participants and researchers and with the broader community. So it's really central to the methodology that it promotes political participation for those who have traditionally sat outside of those political processes. So just a little bit about the people who participated in the study. There were 11 participants from 5 Australian states, and they participated in an initial workshop where we decided the guiding aims of the photovoice study. And then participants went away and responded to the photovoice questions with their choice of media. So then about a month or 2 after that, we came back together and did an interview, and that was either in person or via video link, and they went for about 1 to 2 hours each. So after all the interviews and writing up the narratives, we also had a post-interview workshop to decide what was really important in terms of outputs from the project and who were the target audience. So I'll just talk really briefly about how the narratives were written. So firstly, by analysing the interview transcripts and putting it into a narrative structure, so it was kind of consistent across all the interviews. And the narratives kind of present participant responses to the guiding questions, their explanations of the media pieces, conversations within the interview where we were finding words to explain something together. Oh, sorry, that's my speaker turning off. And we were really co-creating the meaning together throughout this process of interview and checking the transcripts, sending the narratives back and forth, really to make sure everybody was happy with kind of the end result, that privacy, we were upholding privacy and anonymity, and really kind of conveying the meaning that they wanted to convey. And so the narratives, which are now on the website, incorporate quotes, reflections, analytical points, and also elements of creative writing. So there are a lot of findings from the whole study, but I'm just going to focus on 2 or 3 here. And if you'd like to access the site in your own time, I'd encourage you to see what really lifts up for you in terms of the commonalities between participant experiences, but also seeing that there was a wide range of experiences as well. So I suppose these are kind of some of the main takeaways, but there will be many more as you look through the website. So firstly, there were cycles of inequality throughout all of the stories, which were really all unique in their own way, but all really demonstrated these kind of cycles of equality in terms of financial hardship, social isolation, and also a lot of themes around housing. So I'll open Layla's story just to give an example around that social isolation. So Layla's story really highlighted how the compounding impact of social isolation, firstly due to her experience of her ex-husband's use of power and control, which exacerbated her functional neurological disorder, and then being forced to leave her faith community in the aftermath of his use of violence. So she was able to re-establish herself in a new place and build relationships, which took an enormous amount of time and energy, which was something Layla had very little of as she managed her neurological and physical impairments and treatments, leaving her with very little energy and money to engage in new social activities. So she gave really raw descriptions of isolation, but also really practical suggestions on how workers and employers could better support her. So Layla said, it's like all my energy goes to surviving, and I want to get out to these groups and I want to connect with people. But by the time it gets to that, it's like, where's my energy to do that? And she goes on, it's hard to develop connections and to trust after experiences of domestic violence, but also that the places you can go, like the services and groups, are not catered towards your needs. So she offered some really practical suggestions around, she said it would really help to have someone sitting alongside you to take away that feeling of isolation. Like what I talked about with having that person on the phone, just that one person that talks to you and makes you feel connected and says, hey, I've just talked to this person and I've got this organised. Just that person that regularly connects with you. One person would make a world of difference. So she talked about practical measures like outreach support for people with disability and how services could be more individualised and follow up with people rather than them being passed through the system. So in Layla's words, I hate the system, but I need the system. Another key finding was really highlighted throughout most of, if not all of the narratives, and that was participants being disbelieved or having their experiences minimised by those around them. So women with disability had their credibility denied and their experiences minimised by family members, partners, healthcare professionals, police, and it really impacted access to appropriate support and connecting with their community, being able to talk to people with shared experience, whether that be because of the denial of their disability or being misidentified as primary aggressors or perpetrators, as we know is really common. So this tendency to disbelieve and minimise the experiences of women with disability was often seized on by men using family violence to further isolate and harm women and restrict access to safety and support. So in an example from Annika, so Annika was receiving hospital treatment for her and her son following an incident or severe physical violence on a particular incident, but it was in the context of violence and abuse over a long period of time. And she paints a really chaotic scene in the hospital. So she says, I couldn't wait to get out of the hospital. Well, he was also threatening to come into the hospital and kill us there if necessary. So the hospital were blaming me for a potential threat. The police had taken away my phone so they could track the threats. And then the narrative goes on to say, as is common for people with autism, Annika has developed ways of stimming or self-stimulatory behaviours which allow her to cope and self-regulate. So while she was pacing around the hallway and rocking to calm herself, this was misidentified by police and medical staff, which thought this behaviour was an expression of mental ill health, and she was there was an attempt to section her under the Mental Health Act. And this made it really hard to cope in the moment, and also the feeling of being wrongly judged was hard to cope with. So participants also reflected on their experience of the photo voice process within the interviews. and talked about how photo voice might be a way of being seen and listened to in a way that works for them. So Marion quote noted the use of visual medium really suited her strengths and that she felt quite comfortable. And she had said, I feel quite comfortable. It's actually quite interesting. And I think when you have a disability, I'm very visual. So it probably helps a lot of people visually because that can probably go back and maybe helps the mind understand a bit more and remember. Similarly to Tanya was another participant who was involved in creative works, and she said it was really interesting because I think the use of images to explain something, you know, immediately I think about my work as an artist and you're using images of things and symbols of things. So there were some limitations to the process as well. Like the photos or media might not be able to convey really complex messages. It was also an emotionally challenging topic, and there were, as I mentioned earlier, measures which needed to be put in place to increase safety and anonymity of participants as well. So for me as a researcher too, the collaborative and intersectional nature of the project really meant engaging with a lot of grey areas and practicing critical reflection at each step of the way. So as I've mentioned, developing the narratives was really an exercise in that co-creating meaning, and that took time to check back in and think about how my impact and what I was putting into the narrative was shaping what was shared and how that was shared. And the use of media within the interviews and the outputs really helped to develop the story and blend traditional approaches with creative approaches. So that was something that was really new for me as well. But like I said, that process can take a lot of time as well. So I was having conversations with participants right up until, you know, even a week or two ago about what we were putting into the narratives and putting up on this website. So it was an ongoing process, and we actually have the web developer and artist Ilma Gore here as well today. And I'm just wondering if Ilma, you wanted to share any reflections on that process of creating the website as well, because Ilma came on board mid last year and really collaborated in bringing this website together.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Great.
Hello, everyone. I'm an artist and web designer. My name is Ilma Gore. I'm also an advocate for stronger domestic violence laws. I've lobbied for and successfully helped pass the Phoenix Act in multiple states in the USA. My work has also contributed to defining coercive control and legislation overseas. And above all, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. Reading the stories in Brontë's work has left an indelible mark on me. As we all know, you don't just become a survivor once, you become a survivor every single morning you wake up and keep going. Survival from domestic violence is a lifelong journey, and the bravery of the participants is something no words, a website, or art can fully capture. I hope my work reflects even a fraction of that courage. But more than anything, I want to say thank you to Brontë and to her team and every person who shared their story. When choosing the colors and the composition, it was important for me to try to capture the true gravity of the stories and the challenges everyone faced, while also not fully understanding or grasping all of them. I wanted to capture the pain, but also the courage and the hope that everyone was sharing. And I'm very proud to have been a small part of this project. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Ilma. It was such a great process and a lot of learning for me as well along the way. So yeah, and I guess that's why we're all here today, to look at and kind of the final product and start conversation around the website. So I might just hand back to Lynelle.
Thank you.
Introduce Alison. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Bronte. And also, Elma, thank you for your comments as well. It's very powerful work. And I wondered if you could, Bronte, just to scroll down a little bit so we're currently on my screen, just so we can see a little bit more of the picture. Thank you as we move to the next. That's awesome. If you could do that, that would be great. I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker for our session. Alison is joining us. Alison is the CEO of the Centre for Women's Safety and Wellbeing. So welcome. And Alison's work is driven by the belief that women and children have the fundamental human right to live free from fear and violence, encompassing protection and all forms of discrimination, exploitation and abuse. And we are really delighted to have Alison say some words and speak to us about her work and the centre's work in this next session. So I hand over to you, Alison. If you could come on, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynelle. And can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good.
Lovely.
All right. And it's great that we've got such interesting interpreters to watch, because I don't have any slides to match the beautiful artwork that Brontё has been showing, so that's a relief. And thank you so much for inviting me as well to present at such a launch of such an important website, Hidden Someone. I'd like to also just start by acknowledging that I'm working on Wonjok Noongar Butcher, and to pay my deepest respects to the traditional owners of the land and elders past and present. I also think it's appropriate to state at the outset that Bronte's work has been really important to me, because I'm a woman with a disability. I have very little vision in one eye and no vision in the other, and this is due to something called Marfan syndrome. And that's a genetic condition that I was born with. I missed a lot of school when I was young. Couldn't see the whiteboard. Sometimes I think it was even the blackboard in those days. Just revealing my age. Even when I was sitting right at the front. In my era, there was no education support. So I taught myself really to read and write and do maths. The number of times I've gotten lost by getting off at the wrong bus stop or waved down the wrong bus, and so sometimes it would actually take me hours to find my way back home. What strikes me most when I look back is how inept I felt. I was called Calamity, always in very endearing ways, called, Calamity Jane, clumsy, disorganised, and that told that I had my head in the clouds. But as an adult, I'm actually quite impressed with little Alison, her resilience and creative ways of navigating all those barriers. Bronte's Hidden Someone's photovoice project is a welcomed accomplishment, because it is so deeply respectful of the people participating in it. The different dimensions of each person and the context of their day-to-day lives is captured with depth and understanding and integrity. The violence and abuse and its impact is more vivid to us because we can see it in the context of each person's life. Each photo voice also lays bare an almost callous environment that struts an able-bodied way of seeing and knowing, doing and being that minoritisers, excludes and isolates. And we see how complicit this is in the abuse and violence. We see the sheer courage, will, resistance and creativity of each photo voice participant. We also feel the sheer exhaustion and hard work and effort emotionally and physically to survive in this able-bodied world. Women with disabilities often say that their greatest difficulties and challenges in life are not so much that they have disabilities as it is people's attitudes and behaviours towards them, and barriers to their participation in the community, socially, in employment, education, and also services. In 2015, we actually received funding for an initiative that we called Doors to Safety for women with disabilities experiencing domestic and family violence. When undertaking research for this project, so bearing in mind that was 2015, so about 10 years ago, I was astounded to come across research from over a decade before that was using qualitative interviews with victim survivors with disabilities and service providers to argue for more inclusive and accessible services and supports for women with disabilities experiencing family and domestic violence. Our qualitative research was almost identical, other than a few little bit of changes in language, as were our recommendations for change. Years after our project ended, the Pat Giles Centre for Non-Violence, and I noticed Josie's online, received funding from the Department of Communities for their modified service delivery pilot. This successful pilot focuses on increasing the confidence and capability of the family and domestic violence and disability sectors to support positive outcomes for people with disability experiencing violence. Training is provided that supports services to identify barriers faced by people with disability in accessing family and domestic violence services, and also learn how to modify service delivery to better meet the needs of people with disability, and explore effective referral pathways and resources. Importantly, it has a train the trainer component, which means other service providers can play an active part in building the capability of their own service and also supporting the capability of others. There's also a secondary consultation component, which I know is particularly popular in the sector. But given that women with disabilities experiencing family and domestic violence are identified as a priority group in state and national policies and strategies, the poor lack of investment in ensuring services are better able to meet the needs of women with disabilities and their children, I think, is quite astounding. According to a report called Shut Out, people with disabilities lack services and support, as well as aids, equipment, assistive technologies and housing options, have difficulty getting a job, lack access to the built environment, information and access to transport, and have poor education experiences and are isolated and often alone. It's particularly difficult to overcome these imposed disadvantages if you are a woman with disability, because women generally are more likely to experience family, domestic and sexual violence, sexual harassment and discrimination, housing insecurity and casual employment and low income. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, and Brontё's work shows how marginalised people with disabilities experiencing violence and abuse continue to be. However, while we work on more transformative change, it's important that services working with women with disabilities experiencing family and domestic and sexual violence do all that they can to ensure that they're safe and inclusive and also equitable services. So this includes training staff in disability inclusion and how to work with National Disability Insurance Scheme. But staff training alone is not enough to embed disability inclusion in service delivery and practice. Other strategies are important to ensure disability inclusion is continuously improved and built upon as the service and staff will inevitably change. Also, language is a powerful tool for building disability inclusion, and using that inclusive language can help ensure people with disability feel safe and respected and confident to seek help. When working with victim survivors with disability, it's important to use positive, sensitive and strength-based language that demonstrates value and respect. Specialist family and domestic violence practitioners also need to become comfortable with routinely asking questions about disability as part of their risk assessments and their safety planning. Some of the strategies in a typical safety plan may not be feasible for a victim survivor with disability who may depend heavily on their perpetrator to carry out everyday tasks. For example, a victim survivor who uses a wheelchair might face physical barriers when trying to escape an abusive home. Someone who is deaf or hearing impaired may face communication barriers within the support services that they try to access. Where the perpetrator is also the victim survivor's carer, services may need to seek consent from the victim survivor to work collaboratively with other services to facilitate that safety planning. The best way to develop a suitable safety plan is to work closely with the victim survivor. Excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold. And assist them to make informed decisions. One of the barriers to safety for victim survivors with disability is the fear of losing access to vital daily supports or equipment. For example, a victim survivor may rely on support from someone who is perpetrating violence and therefore may not have safe access to vital disability aids and also equipment. Supporting the victim survivor to access supports or equipment in the short term is an important part of a family and domestic violence response. The availability of affordable, accessible housing is another considerable barrier for victim survivors with disability escaping violence. For some people with disability, moving into emergency accommodation or relocating permanently can be scary or traumatic, as it is for women without a disability. Relocating may compromise a victim survivor's confidence or independence, particularly if they have to leave behind valuable disability adaptations and equipment, along with familiarity and that familiarity and comfort of their own home. For these reasons, it's important to help victim survivors with disability explore the option of remaining in their own home and having the perpetrator excluded. If they need to go into temporary crisis accommodation, it's important to support the victim survivor to identify any additional supports they may require while navigating their changed circumstances during the crisis. And finally, I want to reaffirm that disability is created by discriminatory practices and attitudes that have built up over time. Disability is preventable and can be addressed through government policy and regulation. There continues to be a critical need to give attention to gender and disability and other layers of disadvantage when analysing, preventing and responding to violence. Without this multi-layered focus, women with disabilities will continue to live with an increased risk of experiencing violence and experiencing barriers to justice and also to community services. I'd like to end with the words of Michelle, a woman with a disability and a victim survivor of domestic violence. If you are experiencing violence, go to a women's organisation or someone you can trust that is likely to believe you, because that's the first thing you want. There's nothing worse than going to somebody and they don't believe you. And then you often stop there and you don't follow it through. The other thing for people with disabilities, be strong in yourself and know that what you're feeling, if it's feeling wrong, then it is wrong. Thank you, and thank you, Brontё.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Affirmation of the work. I'm going to call on Beck Waters now. If you could come on. We've asked Beck to take some questions, and I think people can put on their cameras and their mics if they want to and ask the question, or they can put it in the chat and I'll be helping with this, and so will Brontё. But the questions are mainly for Brontё and our speakers. So over to you, Beck.
Thanks, Lynelle. Welcome, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I am one of the other members of the research team with Brontё. It gives me a great pleasure to see the culmination of her very extensive work working with women with disability who've experienced family and domestic violence. We'd like to open the floor now. You might have some comments or some questions that you would like to raise in the group. You're very, very welcome to turn your camera on and ask that live, or alternately to put your question or comment in the chat. We're very welcome. You're very welcome to pop that in there. So I'll stop talking for a second, and if there is anyone, please follow the etiquette of using online meetings. Pop your hand up if you'd like to say something, or we'll just get started.
Thanks, Beck. I just wanted to jump in again and say a big thank you to Alison for presenting today and kind of giving that wider context to what's been happening in the sector for decades now. And it is reaffirming, but also disheartening to hear that the same kind of themes and recommendations are coming up so much over time. So and you mentioned, Alison, the work happening at the moment with the centre, but also in the wider sector, like with Patricia Giles and upskilling workers, doing train the trainers, really building momentum around how can we be more inclusive to support clients, but then also to make the workplace more inclusive for workers, to kind of address some of that financial hardship that women with disability are experiencing. So yeah, it was really great to hear that context, and thank you. You've been so supportive of the project throughout this whole time. So really appreciate you speaking today.
Thank you, Brontё. And just on that note, you know, with when you talk about that economic security, I think when I look back on the Doors to Safety project, that was the reason why, for me, it was so important to have women with disabilities developing and leading and delivering that project. And the women themselves had quite complex disabilities, and so there were really important, and I say important challenges because I think it's through those important challenges that we really start to work differently in a way that's meaningful and has an impact on people with disabilities. And so it was really difficult in a really good way, if that makes sense. And what was so wonderful to see was just incredible women with disabilities with their own lived experiences do such important work and really lead the work. And it's just it's awful to see all of that potential and know what we can do, and I think that's what can be disheartening is I'm still in touch with so many of those women, and they're either out of work or they're in insecure work, and I think that's we need to understand that comprehensive change is required to really ensure there's that true, genuine participation and engagement and meaningful work and economic security to be able to have some quality life choices, and that's what I think you could really feel in your work as well, that there's a big responsibility for us all. We all play a part and we're all complicit to an extent, if that makes sense, and it's very important work. I can't really emphasize that more strongly. So, thanks.
Thank you. And it sounds like it was a really great process, and maybe even became a blueprint for things after that. And while you're talking, I'm kind of reflecting on how much research processes can really enable or constrain that genuine participation, and how we could be doing that a lot better. Because as I mentioned, the process of photovoice, and we it kind of went over a long period of time, and there were several points of engagement, and how do we ensure that, you know, people are paid properly and acknowledged for their time and expertise in the participating in the research, but then, you know, how could that also be extended?
Yeah.
Thanks, Brontё. I'm just checking if anyone else has got any questions or comments that they'd like to pass on either the project or the website or the current situation. Evelyn, you popping your hand up there physically? Hand over to you. Thank you.
Yes, I've got a hand disability, so I can't join the chat. I just wanted to. I'm Evelyn. I'm from Naarm, Wurundjeri land. I just wanted to congratulate Brontё. I have lived experience, as she has evidenced, but perhaps what hasn't come across today, and I'd just like to voice my own experience, is just how empowering this process has been for me. And it really did give a voice, and it really had impact. In my case, when I saw the voice, and when I saw the photos, and when I saw so much, as well as experienced so much what Brontё did, it really encouraged me to nominate for another situation, another position, and that's burst out with a whole range of other learnings and findings and contributions to the sector of women with disabilities who experience family violence. I just can't emphasise enough just how empowering the process has been. It's one thing to write it down. In fact, as a radical feminist in a past life, poo-pooed voices, okay, interesting, but man, boy was I wrong. You know, this was a really participatory process, and it was really empowering voice. Thank you, Brontё. Congratulations. All power to you.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Would you like to respond at all, Brontё?
I appreciate the feedback and hearing, you know, what the experience was like of that process. And I know, you know, it was a big commitment over a long time. So I really appreciate the investment, you know, of everyone who took part, and yeah, just so much encouragement along the way. So thank you.
It's so great to hear the power of the authenticity of the process. So thank you, Evelyn. That is just an amazing outcome. You know, the old "nothing about us without us" can be a saying, and it can be, you know, a bit of lip service. But when we really engage in that authentic kind of conversation, I think, with people, the outcomes are way more impactful and way more significant, I think, for all of us moving forward. So thank you.
And I think that's I was just going to say that I think that's the inspiring part of the work as well, Evelyn, is that it is lived experience advocates who really lead and drive the change as well, and that's inspiring to see such incredible human spirit and resilience, and to be the determination to be preventing it from happening to others is the soul of the world, really, and it is the seed of change too. And I think it's what it's all about, and it's what makes it all worth doing, as in it's that real movement, shared movement for change. And so the value of you participating is much more than you probably even realise, in terms of it's part of that creating change.
I was nominated for a position in with Women with Disabilities Victoria, which was funded. It was fiercely competitive, as you'd expect. And this is what encouraged me. This is what encouraged me. It's been really empowering. Thank you.
That's wonderful. We have a couple of comments in the chat. Perhaps first of all, I don't know if you wanted to pick them up, Beck. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got one there from Beck Taylor, who said, unfortunately had to leave, but she has stated that she agrees completely with Alison. It's important work, Brontё, that you've done with such integrity and thoughtfulness, and she looks forward to exploring the website some more. And then Rai or Heidi says, I can resonate with Evelyn's comments. Thank you, Brontё, for your work, empathy and commitment over the project. It provided an opportunity for me personally to reflect on my life experience and connect with a wide range of women intellectually and in a deep but anonymous way. So, we talk in academia about impact, impact of research and impact of the activities that we conduct on our wider communities. And I think this is very evident that this is a project that has had not only personal impact for your participants, but impact more broadly on the community, and the recommendations that have come out from it about how we can do better in terms of policy and service delivery for women leaving family and domestic violence. So, okay, so if there aren't any other comments, I might hand back, I think, to you, Lynelle.
I think we're going to ask Donna if she would like to say a few words, and then Donna's going to hand the baton back to Brontё. But thank you. There's such lovely and wonderful, inspiring comments, and I appreciate that. So over to you, Donna.
Thanks, Lynelle. And I'm on Ghana land in Adelaide at the moment. So I'm coming to you from my phone. And I just wanted to, as part of the research team, acknowledge the sort of privilege that it's been both to work with Brontё on this work, but also the privilege as a research supervisor and research colleague to read women's accounts and stories, which were so expansive and contextually different, and brought for me a really kind of physical as well as emotional reaction to the work. So I think, as someone that's done a lot of work in this area, there was something about the depth of those stories and Bronte's engagement with reflective practices to support women or participants to be involved in the project, which was really exceptional and was very much driven by people's biographies and choices rather than, what do researchers want to know. And I just think that this has been amazing. The website is, I think, stunning. And I think, the thing to say about Brontё is she translates her commitment and her passion into incredibly creative efforts in what we see today, as well as showing great empathy for the participants. Can I also just thank Ilma and thank the participants involved in this work, because obviously we relied totally on you and your goodwill in this process to share with Brontё and then to share with us more widely in the team. And I think that what stands out for me is the very particular ways in which ableism is used against women in different contexts, and the way in which those perpetrating violence very specifically and deliberately use tactics which further exploit and disempower women with disability, and that changes depending on the disability that women are living with. I guess the other thing I just wanted to say in trying to wrap it up is what really comes out through women talking about wanting to speak about it was the incredibly ableist assumptions that are embedded in both the service systems, but also that there's just a lack of universal approach to anything, really, in terms of, for me, women have to always out themselves as having some form of disability to say, well, that wouldn't work for me with the safety plan, or whatever it might be, if they do get to that point. So I think the fact that we are requiring women to always have to explain the way in which ableism operates in their lives is something which really stands out in this project as something concerning too. And then the wider economic and financial stability that women that women in this study had to forego because they were subject to men's and family violence. I just echo what everybody else has said today in terms of the issues. And I guess for me, some of the things that stand out is, the need, from my perspective, the way I see it, I guess, is to constantly be pushing for the rights of women to be more fully realised all of the time, because these citizenship rights aren't fully realised for women with disability, and the importance of dignity in all of this process, and the sort of role of the way that ableism intersects with sexism, intersects with poverty, to make women's lives really, really it's unfair and unjust in these situations. So thank you to the women, and thank you, Brontё. It's been a real pleasure to work alongside you in lifting up all of this, and I really appreciate what Evelyn has said in terms of how important this has been for women to have that reflective space in a way that's really based on what their needs are and where they're at. So I really appreciate that, and fantastic to hear that you're going to be in that role, Evelyn. Great to see that was happening too. So at this point, I'll hand back to Brontё to just give us a final couple of words, and I hope everybody really, I don't know if enjoys, but gains a lot out of seeing the website.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks everyone for your comments and reflections on the work. Really appreciate it. And I suppose the idea behind the website and in meeting here today about how we can continue to prevent violence against women with disability. It's really to start that conversation, and with the focus on social change through photovoice, really I had a few kind of call to actions, but I suppose going away from this, how are we going to, I suppose, better listen to women with disability? How can we better listen to women, and what can we change today about practice, about the way that we approach conversations or our work in a way that can really, I suppose, change the narrative and change discourse in this area. So I've put a few links up on the screen. I had mentioned the scoping review that happened before, so you can access those articles if you're interested, and also continuing the conversation through the Instagram and LinkedIn and things like that. But I have a bit of a mailing list going from this webinar, and so I'd love to keep sending out updates as we do have things like plain language information and other kind of outputs from the process to share with everyone. So I realise we're a minute over time, so thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to my supervisors for helping to organise this, and to the interpreters, Steve and Gabrielle, for coming along as well. Thanks.
Lots of clapping going on here. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Brontё. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you. Thanks. Great job, Brontё.
Well done, Brontё.
Fantastic, Brontё.
All right. Shall we finish the recording there?
Thank you.